recognize that we all have characteristics of being monkeys. What I mean by that, we look, we act, we have got these little characteristics that could almost point us out as Christians, but yet we got flaws. Flaw is not a word that I would choose to use there. Flaw is like calling an addiction a sickness.
I say roadblocks.
That would be a good one. Now, there is an addiction, there is a thing, but as well, there is, you take the addictions of that boy. Amber could tell you all the things that he took. He made that choice to take all the medicines because he wants out there. He begged me to kill him. Dory, begged me to. You know why? He don't want to deal with this stuff no more. You have a life like that boy has had his life. We have to have empathy for people. The day that we have no empathy, or in other words, care about them, I don't have sympathy because I don't feel sorry for him. He made the choice. Every one of us have been in bad circumstances. Every one of us, every day, makes that choice. If he the first time would have made the choice, David, to stay inside, but he couldn't. Because he is being fueled by his rage, being fueled by his all the things that he wants, because he wanted to be that person, so he made these decisions to take this. Yes, there's a whole long thing that goes along with this thing, but the problem is that we have to all face it. That's why it's called the back of the head. We're traveling here, and so the first part of sanctification is you've got to face it. You've got to be real with yourself. You've got to be real with yourself, Eric, and say, I need help. I got a problem. I got to change. And you got to realize that it's not God. It is turning to a higher power to ask God. But if you notice, God says, okay, face the problem. Here's why you're in trouble. Here is why you're in land. Face your problem. Also, it says, right there, it says back of head. Prior to this story, we have been living this mundane, this cold life. We're just living in a mundane existence. We're not holy because, again, we, according to Jews, we can either be holy or not holy. That's what God said. God says you'll either be holy or you say you're not holy. There's just two realms. Two realms. There's no C. There's no two. In other words, what I'm saying is there's no in between. It's here. You're here or you're here. There's no in between. There's no gray areas. There's no, but yet we want it to be. So the thing is that if we want to change, we have to, repentance is what? Repentance has been described best as a turning away. In other words, to turn your back, show the back of your head to whatever your thing is, whatever you're thinking. In other words, to turn away from it. I had to completely break away. Someone asked me, friends, and I thought, my friends they're gone. All of my former friends that I had from that existence, hundreds of them, they're gone. Why? I had to turn away from them. Eric, I had people say, man, God really wants you back. I said, God ain't told me that. Monty has told me that. I said, but I've got a qualifier. When God tells my wife, Monty needs to go back. And if y'all would like to, y'all can go, here's her number. Y'all want to talk to my wife and convince my wife that God's told you that I need to back, and she's going to give you, oh no, we ain't going to face that. See, again, we're not going to face that. So since we're not going to face that, we're going to turn it to the back of our head. We're just going to turn away from it. It's over. I knew that if I had to change, if I had to follow where I believed that God led, I had to turn my back to it. When Amber and I got married, that was the deal. I had one requirement of her: no smoking. I'm not going to live with smoking. Why? I'm not going to let you die. Not going to do it. One of the men taught me a lesson early in my life. He said, son, he says, if there's a word of advice, he says, I can ever give you. He says, it's going to be the hardest advice. He says, I wish now, he said, because somebody told it to me. He says, I didn't listen. He says, I wish I hadn't. Fred Mobbs. Ronnie Mobbs was fireman, make knives and all that. Fred Mobbs, if you go Greenbrier, lived past the light, right there on the left. Old man, he's kind of like the old man of all of them. He said, son, he says, I wish I'd have done one thing. I said, what's that? He said, I wish I'd given my wife a choice. I said, what do you mean? He said, she wouldn't quit smoking. He says, I told her, he said, it's killing you. She said, I don't care. I don't care that it's killing you. He says, I want you to quit. She says, I ain't quitting. He says, I wish I'd have given her a choice to quit or I'm gone. He says, it would have been easier for me to live without her and to hurt without her than, he says, now I'm retired. He said, we finally have got money that we can enjoy our life. We can go do things. He said, we can't travel. We can't go. Everywhere we go, she has an oxygen tank. She carries that oxygen tank. She can't travel. She can't do nothing. He says, she can't walk 10 feet. She got congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure. She has all these medical problems. And he says, here I am now, an old man. I'm ready. I can do things, and I can't do nothing because I did not have the courage to say, make a choice. Make a choice. I've lived in existence. He says, now, what do I have? Nothing. He said it'd been easier to live with pain. Me, I had to turn away. I told Amber, you quit smoking, I'm done with all my friends. I won't go around none of them. That was the decision. There has to be a point. There has to be a cutoff. People was asking me to play music with them. I said, I can't. I cannot go a place that I would not take my grandchildren to. Because my grandchildren see Pawpaw out there drunk, drinking, at a bar. What do you think my grandchildren are going to do?
I don't think it's all right. Follow your footsteps.
Monkey see, monkey do. That's why it's called a monkey. Monkey see, monkey do. You are emulating monkeys. You have to decide you're going to turn away and change. It's also a representative of the eye of the needle. I've told you the story, and I'll tell you again. I was talking to, this is a new part of this. A guy that we're working on his house for, was talking about money. He said, man, he says, I don't want a lot of money. He said, I just want to be content. I said, well, who is the wisest man? He said, well, there was a lot of them. I said, not in the Bible. There's only one. Well, who? I was like, Solomon. What did he ask for? Everything he could ask for, he asked for wisdom. Which is still funny because if you look at the history of Solomon and his decisions, to be so wise, Dory, he still made some stupid decisions. But enough of that. The thing is that Solomon had a prayer. And he said, Lord, make me neither rich nor poor. Do not make me rich. That way I would sin and say I have no need for God. Neither make me poor that I would steal and profane thy name. But put me somewhere in the middle. He said, feed me with food convenient for me. In other words, Dory, the food that he can eat that doesn't spoil him, that doesn't make him feel haughty, that doesn't make him feel better than somebody else. Feed me with food that I can digest and just have an existence. The wisest man in the world asked to be somewhere in the middle. Well, that's wise. Why? Because when the rich young man came to the Lord and he says, Master, what must I do to follow you? Yeshua said, sell all you own, give it to the poor, and follow me. And he says his countenance fell, and he turned away and walked away. He showed him his back of the head. He walked away. Yeshua said, it is easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. So, I would say, common sense would say, David, if God's Son said that riches is the thing that's going to prevent you from getting into heaven, not prevent you, but it would make it very, very hard, what's the last thing I should strive for?
Be rich.
But yet, how much of our time is consumed by wealth and desire riches? How much? He says, do you not know that your Father knows that you need all this stuff? Eye of the needle. Why? Because in the old days of Israel, they had walls. They didn't just make gates and stuff where they always open them, because if you put a big old cowboy days, you see a big old thing and they'd take battering rams and cartoons, they'd hit people on their head and they'd kind of use their heads to push through there. What they did, they had a little bitty gate. It is said to be that a man would have to kind of stoop down to go through. Walk through single file. It's easier for a camel to get through the eye of the needle. The problem is that the camel, by its nature, would have to get down on its hands and knees and crawl. The camel, by its nature, couldn't do that. But it talked about that the camel was so proud because that camel was fighting. So if you imagine getting that camel and squeezing that son of a gun through there. It's just fighting. But it's the analogy of us being afraid that we had to humble ourselves, to get down on our knees, to crawl and beg. God, I need help. This is why sanctification is hard to do. Because we don't want to humble ourselves. We don't want to get on our knees. That's the whole point, the first step of sanctification. But if you will realize that you have lived this existence of a monkey, you realize that you are facing the fact that you've lived this existence with a monkey. This is the first step, to face it. Then you turn your back to that part of being the monkey nature. You see this? You face it, you accept it, then you turn your back to it. This is your first step. The next step is to understand we've got to humble ourselves. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will what? He'll lift you up. What does that mean? Delay. It means doorway. It means a place of change or decision. After you do this thing, you remember I told you guys from the very beginning of this thing that this would cause you and lead us to the place of decision. Right there is your place of decision. If you notice, the left is now traveling the direction that we need to travel in. The left is this door. The door, He said, behold, I stand at the door and I knock. The door opens in. It opens in because this is a point of changing. If you want to change, you have, if you want to be holy, if you want to fast, if you want to do these things to actually accomplish something in your life, to not live this shadow existence, to not live this monkey existence, because the problem is, let's just face it. Is this monkey existence going to allow us to get in the kingdom of heaven? Would you? Think about it, Dora. If you hired somebody to do a job, you paid them a fair wage. They didn't show up. Wouldn't you have expectations? Yeah. What about if you paid them half of it?